What if I gave you just $100 and told you that this small amount could become the beginning of a completely different financial future? Would you spend it, save it, or try to make it grow? Now, most people would immediately search for the fastest investment, the hottest cryptocurrency, or some secret opportunity promising massive returns. But what if the smartest strategy isn't about finding a miracle investment at all? What if the real secret is learning how to think differently about that first $100? Turning $100 into $1,000 is not about getting rich overnight. It's about understanding how small amounts can create bigger opportunities when you have a clear goal, control your risk, create value, and reinvest what you earn. Imagine reaching your first $150, then $225, then $300, $500, and eventually $1,000. Each step isn't just about making more money. It's about learning what works, protecting what you've built, and becoming smarter with every financial decision. So today, we're going to explore a practical way to think about turning $100 into $1,000 without relying on unrealistic promises, dangerous shortcuts, or overnight wealth. Because the real question isn't, how quickly can I become rich? The real question is, what can I build with the first $100 I have? Imagine you have $100 in your hand and your goal is to eventually turn it into $1,000. The first thing you need is not a stock, cryptocurrency, business idea, or secret investment. You need a clear goal and a realistic plan. Without a specific target, money tends to disappear because you don't have a reason to control how you use it. Having a clear goal changes the way you look at every financial decision. If your goal is to grow $100 into $1,000, understand that you are trying to create a tenfold increase. That does not mean you should search for something that promises a 900% return in a few days. In reality, opportunities offering extremely high returns usually involve extremely high risks. A smarter approach is to divide the large goal into smaller and more achievable targets. Instead of thinking only about $1,000, focus first on reaching $150. Once you reach $150, your next target could be $225, followed by $300, $500, and eventually $1,000. This approach makes the goal psychologically easier because you are focusing on progress rather than an unrealistic overnight transformation. It also gives you opportunities to learn from every stage. If you lose money while trying to reach your first target, the loss may teach you something about your strategy before you risk a larger amount. If you make money, you can study what worked and decide how to repeat it responsibly. A clear goal should also have a time frame. You might decide that your objective is to build your $100 into $1,000 over 12 months, 2 years, or even longer. The time frame matters because it determines how much risk you might be tempted to take. If you tell yourself that you must turn $100 into $1,000 within 1 week, you may start chasing unrealistic opportunities. But if you give yourself enough time, you can focus on developing skills, earning additional income, saving more money, and making careful investment decisions. Another important part of setting a goal is understanding what the $1,000 actually represents. If your only goal is to see the number reach $1,000, you might make poor decisions simply to get there. Instead, think about what you want that $1,000 to accomplish. Maybe it becomes an emergency fund, investment capital, education money, business capital, or the foundation of a larger financial plan. When the purpose behind the goal is clear, you are more likely to protect the money instead of immediately spending it. The most important mindset is to treat the original $100 as starting capital rather than disposable cash. Every dollar should have a purpose, whether it is being saved, invested, used to develop a valuable skill, or placed into an opportunity that can potentially generate additional income. This way, the focus moves away from simply finding a quick profit and toward building a repeatable financial process. The second important step is to understand how to use your $100 as starting capital rather than simply treating it as money that needs to be invested somewhere. When you have a small amount of money, your biggest advantage may not be the money itself, but what that money can help you create. Instead of asking, which investment can turn $100 into $1,000? Ask, how can I use this $100 to create more opportunities to earn? For example, imagine you have a useful skill such as video editing, graphic design, writing, photography, social media management, tutoring, translation, or website creation. You could use a portion of your $100 to improve that skill or purchase basic tools that allow you to offer a service. You might spend $20 on learning resources, $20 on software or necessary tools, and keep the remaining money as a reserve. Your goal would then be to find your first customer and earn money from the value you provide. Suppose you create a simple service and charge $25 for it. If you find 4 customers, you have generated $100 in revenue. Your original $100 has now helped you create another $100 instead of simply sitting in your wallet. If your expenses were controlled properly, part of that revenue becomes profit that can be reinvested into the same process. This is important because earning money and investing money are 2 different activities. If you only have $100, expecting a traditional investment to produce $900 quickly is unrealistic. However, using $100 to develop a skill or support a small income-generating activity can potentially increase your earning power much faster. The return doesn't necessarily come from the $100 itself. It comes from what the $100 helps you do. You can also use the money to test a small business idea. For instance, you might purchase a limited amount of a product at a reasonable price and try selling it to customers. The key is to start small rather than putting your entire $100 into inventory before knowing whether people actually want the product. You could test demand with $20 or $30, learn from the results, and then decide whether additional money should be invested. Another possibility is using the money to improve your ability to earn through your existing work. A better computer accessory, professional software, basic equipment, educational course, or marketing expense might help you work faster or reach more customers. The important question before spending is whether the purchase has a reasonable connection to generating value or increasing your income. You also don't have to spend the entire $100. Keeping some money available can protect you from unexpected expenses and prevent you from borrowing money when something goes wrong. A simple approach could be dividing the money between learning, testing an opportunity, and maintaining a small reserve. The biggest mistake would be spending the entire amount simply because you feel you need to invest every dollar immediately. Sometimes the smartest use of capital is to preserve it while you learn, research, and test your idea with a small amount first. This allows you to gain experience without exposing the entire $100 to a single decision. The third important step is to understand that growing $100 into $1,000 usually works better when you think in terms of multiple growth cycles, rather than expecting one huge profit. A lot of people make the mistake of believing that they need one perfect investment that can multiply their money 10 times. That mindset can push them toward extremely risky decisions. A smarter approach is to divide the journey into smaller milestones and focus on making steady progress. Imagine you start with $100 and your first target is $150. You don't need to make $50 from one transaction. You might make $20 from a small service, $15 from selling something, and another $15 from a separate opportunity. Now you have reached your first milestone. The important lesson isn't simply that you made $50. It is that you discovered a process that can potentially be repeated. From $150, your next target could be $225. At this stage, you have more capital than when you started, which means you may have more options. You could reinvest some of your profits into improving a service, purchasing additional inventory, learning a useful skill, or adding money to a diversified investment. The goal is to allow your capital base to gradually become larger. This is where compounding becomes powerful. Compounding means that the money you earn can eventually become part of the money used to generate future returns. For example, if you have $100 and generate a $20 profit, you now have $120. If you reinvest that $20 rather than spending it, the next opportunity starts with more capital. Over multiple cycles, even relatively small gains can become meaningful. However, real-world growth is rarely perfectly consistent. You might make $31 a month and lose $10 the next. You might have a month where nothing works. That doesn't automatically mean the strategy has failed. What matters is whether you are learning from the results and managing your risk carefully. For example, if you are selling products, you might discover that one product sells quickly while another remains unsold. Instead of continuing to put money into the product that isn't working, you can shift your resources toward what customers actually want. If you're providing a service, you might discover that one type of customer is much more profitable than another. Your next cycle can then be based on that information. The same principle applies to investing. You should not assume that every investment will rise. Markets can move up and down, and losses are possible. A diversified approach, appropriate risk level, and long-term perspective are generally more sensible than constantly jumping between investments looking for the next huge return. Breaking the $1,000 goal into smaller stages also gives you psychological advantages. Reaching $150 proves that you can create progress. Reaching $250 gives you more confidence. Reaching $500 shows that your process may be working. Each milestone becomes evidence that disciplined decisions can move you forward. The real objective is not simply to make one lucky profit. It is to build a repeatable cycle where you create value, earn money, protect your capital, reinvest a portion of your gains, and improve your strategy based on experience. Over time, these smaller cycles can potentially move you from $100 toward $1,000 without requiring one dangerous all-or-nothing bet. Reinvesting your profits is one of the most important principles when you are trying to grow a small amount of money. When you make your first profit, it can be tempting to spend it immediately. You might think, I earned this money, so I should enjoy it. There is nothing wrong with enjoying your money. But if your goal is to turn $100 into $1,000, constantly removing your profits will make the journey much slower. Imagine you start with $100 and use it to create a small income opportunity. After your expenses, you make a $30 profit. You now have $130. If you spend that $30, your capital remains at $100. You are basically starting from the same position again. But if you reinvest the $30, your working capital becomes $130. Your next opportunity can potentially generate more because you are starting with a larger amount. This doesn't mean you should blindly put every dollar back into the same opportunity. Reinvestment should be strategic. Before putting your profits back into something, ask yourself what will increase your chances of earning more. Maybe you need better equipment, better software, additional inventory, advertising, education, or another tool that can improve your ability to generate income. For example, suppose you start a small online service with $100 and earn $50 in profit. Instead of spending all $50, you could use $20 to improve your service, keep $20 as additional working capital, and reserve $10 for unexpected expenses. This allows your business or income activity to grow while still giving you some financial protection. The same idea applies to investing. If an investment generates income or grows in value, Reinvesting those returns can help increase the amount of capital working for you. Over a long period, returns can potentially generate additional returns. This is one reason compound growth is such an important concept in personal finance. However, reinvestment doesn't mean ignoring your personal financial needs. If you have high-interest debt, urgent expenses, or no emergency savings, putting every available dollar into a risky opportunity may not be sensible. Your financial foundation should come first. Growing money is useful, but protecting yourself from financial emergencies is equally important. Another important point is that you should reinvest into what is actually working. Suppose you spend $50 testing a product and discover that customers are not interested. The answer isn't necessarily to spend another $200 on the same product. Instead, study the result and change your approach. Maybe the product was wrong, the price was too high, or you were targeting the wrong customers. Good reinvestment is based on evidence rather than emotion. You can also reinvest in yourself. Sometimes the best return doesn't come from buying an asset. It comes from developing a skill that increases your future earning ability. Spending a reasonable amount on learning a valuable skill can potentially help you earn far more than the original amount over time. The ultimate goal is to create a cycle where your money produces an opportunity. The opportunity generates profit, and part of that profit is used to create the next opportunity. As your capital grows, you can gradually increase the size of your activities while maintaining careful control over risk. This process may feel slow at first, but consistently keeping profits productive instead of immediately consuming them can make a major difference over the long term. The fifth and most important principle is controlling risk. When you are trying to turn $100 into $1,000, it can be very tempting to take enormous risks because the target seems far away. You might see someone online claiming they turned a small amount into thousands in a few days and think you should do the same. But chasing extraordinary returns can quickly turn your $100 into zero. The goal is not simply to make money. It is to stay in the game long enough to keep learning and growing. Think about your $100 as something that needs protection. If you lose the entire amount on your first attempt, you have no capital left to continue. But if you risk only a small portion, a mistake becomes a lesson rather than a disaster. For example, instead of putting all $100 into one untested idea, you might decide that only $20 or $30 is available for experimentation, while the rest remains protected. The exact amount depends on your situation, but the principle is simple. Never allow one decision to destroy your entire financial plan. You also need to understand the difference between investing and gambling. Investing involves putting money into an asset or opportunity with an understanding of the potential risks and expected return. Gambling depends heavily on chance and often encourages people to keep putting money in after losses. If your strategy depends on getting lucky rather than creating value or making informed decisions, you are moving away from a sustainable financial approach. Another major risk is believing in guaranteed returns. If someone tells you that you can turn $100 into $1,000 with absolutely no risk, that should immediately raise a warning sign. Legitimate investments can lose value. Businesses can fail. Markets can decline. Even a good idea can produce disappointing results. Anyone promising extraordinary returns with no possibility of loss deserves serious skepticism. You should also be careful with debt and leverage. Borrowing money to increase the size of a trade or investment can make profits larger, but it can also make losses much larger. If you are starting with only $100, using borrowed money to chase a tenfold return can put you in a much worse position than where you started. You should understand exactly how much you can lose before entering any financial opportunity. Diversification can also help reduce unnecessary risk. Instead of depending entirely on one asset, business idea, customer, or income source, you can gradually build different sources of financial stability. This doesn't eliminate risk, but it can prevent one failure from destroying everything you have built. Risk management also means knowing when to stop. If an idea isn't working, continuing to invest money simply because you have already spent money is a common mistake. Past losses should not force you to create future losses. Sometimes protecting your remaining capital is more valuable than trying to recover everything immediately. Most importantly, never invest money that you need for rent, food, bills, emergencies, or essential responsibilities. Money used for investing or experimenting should be money you can realistically afford to lose. Building wealth is a long-term process, and protecting your financial foundation gives you the ability to continue making thoughtful decisions. The smartest person in the room isn't necessarily the one taking the biggest risk. It is often the person who understands how much risk they can survive and refuses to let one bad decision end the journey. Turning $100 into $1,000 is not about finding a magical investment or taking one massive risk. It is about changing the way you think about money. Start with a clear goal, use your money as starting capital, focus on small growth cycles, reinvest your profits strategically, and most importantly, protect your capital from unnecessary risks. Remember, the journey from $100 to $1,000 may not happen overnight, and it doesn't need to. Every small milestone teaches you something. Every profit can become new capital, every mistake can become a lesson, and every smart decision can move you closer to your goal. The real achievement is not simply reaching $1,000. It is developing the discipline and financial understanding that allows you to continue building after you reach it. So don't focus on getting rich quickly. Focus on becoming financially smarter, creating value, increasing your earning ability, protecting what you have, and making your money more productive over time. And never forget that one bad decision should not be allowed to destroy everything you've built. I wish you the very best of luck on your financial journey. Stay patient, stay disciplined, keep learning, and make every dollar count. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this speech gave you a new perspective on what is possible when you start small and think strategically. Good luck, and thank you.